This is Grand Admiral Zillik of the Anarch-Colonial Authority to anyone in range. Please help us. We don't know why they attacked us, or where they came from, but they've eliminated our fleets, our colonies, and our homeworld. This civilian colony and a few planetary defense vessels are all we have left, and they're coming. We are a peaceful race with much history and knowledge to share. We can't end like this. Please help us. Transmission sent. Captain's log, May 15th, 127 New Terran calendar. We have completed first contact protocols with the Zenforans, an odd race, very different from humanity, but I believe we have a lot to learn from them, and them from us. For example, their uncertainty drive, a form of propulsion that in my opinion is quite interesting, should give our scientists back home something to study and debate over for many years to come. They also have some odd, albeit interesting cultural aspects that should be interesting to study, like the right of mate stealing, where a Zenforan may challenge the current mate of a past mate to a ritualistic duel where, if successful, said Zenforan earns the right to their past mate again. Just one of many cultural differences. I'm going to recommend we open diplomatic and economic relations with them. On another note, today marks the 3rd anniversary of our mission. Although I do miss Earth, this exploration mission is more exciting than I could have ever imagined and wouldn't. Yellow alert, Captain Kelly to the bridge. Computer pause log. She sighed, annoyed at the sudden interruption before getting up and entering the bridge. We've picked up a general distress call from an uncharted system 3 light years away. We're currently running the message through the translation matrix. Computer estimates 2 minutes before the message is ready. She sighed to herself. Her first officer may have called yellow alert a bit prematurely, but still she probably would have done the same in his shoes. Set a course, FTL Factor 3. We're going to want to hear the message before arrival, so we know what we're dealing with. Minutes later, the computer beeped, indicating the message was ready. The fleet was under strict orders to not involve themselves in alien wars. Still, though, she couldn't help but wonder if it was worth breaking orders. After all, humanity not 100 years earlier almost faced annihilation at the hands of a hostile race. The war was won by the skin of their teeth. Still, though, what if they hadn't? The sum of human knowledge and history gone. Her very existence robbed, before she had a chance to experience it. She couldn't let another race fall into that fate, but she couldn't break orders either. She would have to choose. Captain, I'm detecting a small fleet, about a dozen vessels of unknown configuration on course for the system. They will arrive before we do, chimed her tactical officer. She would have to make a decision, and she didn't have much time. Admiral! The sub-commander grabbed Zillik's attention. The enemy fleet just entered the system. Order our ships into defensive posture. Do not let the enemy get near the colony. All 4 planetary defense ships reporting engagement of the enemy, barked the sub-commander. Alarms started blazing as sensors indicated massive explosions on the edge of the system. The admiral looked at his view screen as one by one, the planetary defense ships stopped reporting back, until there was radio silence. The enemy fleet is on the move again, back on course for us. All 12, sir, although one of them seems to have sustained some damage. Charge weapons and raise shields. We're not going down without a fight. He counted down the minutes. It wouldn't be long before they were in weapons range, and he knew they wouldn't last long once the fleet arrived. Unknown configuration. Our scans can't penetrate their shields, but it's massive, 27 gillips long by 11 grillips high. Sir, the unknown vessel is broadcasting a message to the enemy fleet. The sub-commander tapped on his console before a picture of an alien appeared on screen. He had never seen this species before, although they did look somewhat similar, the Anor, albeit without cranial ridges. This is Captain Kelly of the United Terran Alliance. Seize and desist all hostile actions immediately or you will be fired upon. Sir, the enemy fleet is not responding to them, although they have changed course and are heading for the alien vessel, closing fast. The sub-commander paused for a moment. The enemy fleet is engaging the alien vessel. The admiral stared at the view screen and watched, as a new sense of cautious hope arose within him. Alarms were blaring and red lights flashing indicating red alert status. They're firing another volley of torpedoes, shouted the tactical officer. The entire bridge crew was jolted back as 5 more torpedoes made contact with the shields rocking the entire ship, clearly indicating the inertial dampeners were damaged. The captain looked up to see the quantum cannon hitting the lead vessel. That last volley knocked our shields down to 71%, shouted the tactical officer. She looked up as the view screen showed the vessel igniting in what can only be described as a spectacular explosion. Keep firing, take out their shields with the quantum cannon, and finish them off with the antimatter warheads. Suddenly, Kelly was jolted off her feet and hit the floor. A console exploded next to a bridge officer as more enemy torpedoes made contact with the shields. Shields are down to 55%, and I'm getting casualty reports from all across the ship. I'm also detecting multiple micro-explosions in engineering. As the captain looked back at the view screen as another alien ship exploded in another spectacular antimatter explosion. Captain, 5 more alien ships are in weapons range. The tactical station beeped, indicating a new type of warhead was detected and locked on. Unknown warheads. 12, no, 13. 15 all locked on and closing fast. Brace for impact! The whole bridge crew was knocked around as the ship was jolted back. Several more consoles exploded, debris getting flung around, cutting the skin of several bridge crew. Kelly was knocked off her feet again. Several new alarms started blaring. Engineering is reporting several coolant leaks and 3 shield emitters blowing out, with the rest approaching critical pressure, yelled the operations officer. Captain, we can't take much more of this, Commander Jenkins pleaded. Set a course for the orbital station and hail it, Kelly shouted. Keep us ahead of the enemy vessels and do not stop firing. Try to deflect their volleys if you can. Admiral, the alien vessel has changed course. It's heading right for us and closing fast. ETA 2 minutes. Suddenly, the sub-commander's console beeped. Sir, they're hailing us. Put it through, ordered the admiral. Captain Kelly appeared on the view screen once again, but this time her face was dirty, and some sort of red liquid was dropping from what appeared to be a wound on her forehead. We picked up your distress call. I couldn't let a sentient species face annihilation. Listen, I don't have time to explain my motives. Our shields are nearly depleted, and we've taken damage. We'll have to leave the system, but we can take some of your people with us. But we'll need to know your species' biosphere requirements if we are to transport some of your people aboard. It may take a few minutes to do so. Your station may have to protect us. We can do that. Zillick motioned to the sub-commander to send them the biosphere requirements and species specifications. We're sending you the data now. Captain Kelly paused, looking over the data before continuing. Looks like our species are similar enough that we won't have to modify the atmosphere, but we'll only be able to carry a few hundred at most. Is it true what you said in the distress call, that this is the last of your kind? That's correct. Take the crew from this station. They should be sufficient in continuing my species. Dock with us and we should be able to provide protection until you have them. Understood. She turned to her helmsman. You heard him, dock with them, but be ready to undock an FTL out of the system at a moment's notice. They managed to destroy once of the alien vessels by the time they reached their destination. It didn't take long before the station's shields were depleted, and the enemy torpedoes started blasting the station apart. Undock, raise shields, and move us away from the station, barked Kelly. Yes, ma'am, yelled the helmsman as pieces of the station smashed into the ship's shields as it moved away. Captain Kelly, the admiral said, still on the comm, thank you. The transmission suddenly cut off as the rest of the station blew up in a fiery hellstorm. The helmsman frantically tapped his console before the ship zipped out of the system, followed shortly by half a dozen of the unknown alien ships. Did our message get through? I don't know, it could have, but they started jamming us within seconds of transmitting. Suddenly everyone jolted forward as another console exploded, rocking the ship. A string of new alarms started blaring from nearly every station. Direct hit to our second engine. We're venting plasma, shouted the tactical officer. I'm detecting a buildup of pressure in the FTL drive. We'll only be able to maintain FTL for a few more minutes until a cascade reaction, the helmsman yelled. Scan for any nearby systems, stellar phenomenon, or anything we could use to our advantage, shouted Kelly. The ship rocked once again, as several more torpedoes made contact by the shields. The ops console exploded, sending the ops officer flying into a wall. Several bridge officers were knocked off their feet. That last volley blew out our remaining shield emitters. Direct hit to our third engine. Target the closest ship and fire all weapons, shouted Kelly before the tactical officer typed on his console. Captain, shouted the science officer, I'm detecting a stellar nebula less than a light year away. It's the only thing in range. Set a course. Helm, put us as close to it as you can before exiting FTL. The tactical station beeped as the view screen displayed the closest alien vessel cracking in half and subsequently dropping out of FTL. We'll be arriving at the nebula in less than 5 seconds, chimed the helmsman. 4, 3, 2. Alien ship in weapons range, they've locked onto our reactor, shouted Tactical. Take them out, shouted Kelly. And don't stop firing until they're destroyed. Less than 1 minute until we've reached the perimeter of the nebula, shouted the helmsman. The tactical station beeped. They've fired another volley of torpedoes. Take them out, shouted Kelly. I don't want a single one of them making contact with the hull. The tactical officer frantically typed, as the rest of the bridge crew watched, as the torpedoes were picked off by the quantum cannons one by one. Kelly watched the alien vessel explode after a few hits before the ship entered the nebula. Captain's log, May 16th, 127 New Terran calendar. It's been a full 24 hours since we've entered the nebula and 4 alien ships pursued us in. Since then, we've been playing cat and mouse with them. Coming here was a good call, as this nebula seems to be affecting their sensors more than it is ours. So far, we've been able to use this to our advantage by picking off 2 of their ships as they searched for us. It should be noted that this mysterious alien race may represent an existential threat to humanity. As my tactical officer has noted, they seem to be adapting to our weapons. When we first engaged them at the Enorian colony, it only took a single quantum cannon shot to take out their ship's shields. Last time it took 6. And we've made an enemy of them. I have no way of knowing if our distress call got through to command. If not, humanity may be completely blindsided by an invasion by aliens already adapted to our weapons and tactics. I can only hope it did. Even if they can't send help, at least they could mobilize. She sighed. It had been a long day and she was exhausted. She wanted nothing more than to climb into bed and get some much-needed rest. But she couldn't, not now. She had to deal with the remaining 2 vessels first. Captain, to the bridge! Commander Jenkins' voice rang around her head. Why couldn't this situation be over already? Did she make the right call in helping the Enorians? Sure, saving them was the morally righteous thing to do, but her duty wasn't to uphold morality. Her duty was to follow orders, and she broke the most important one by involving a fleet vessel and subsequently drawing humanity into an alien war. At least she managed to save a few hundred Enorians. That is assuming they managed to get out of this situation. A consolation prize she could cherish at her inevitable court-martial. She got up and walked into the bridge, what was left of it anyway. He paused for a moment before continuing. There is some good news, though. Engineering reports they managed to repair some of the shield emitters, although I doubt they'll last very long. The bridge crew frantically started typing on their respective consoles. Focus fire on the first vessel. Once that's destroyed, move on to the second. They've detected us, exclaimed the tactical officer. They're coming about. The sound of the quantum cannons and torpedo launchers could be heard throughout the ship. Incoming torpedoes. Brace for impact, yelled Kelly before being jolted out of her seat. Sparks and debris flew across the bridge as more consoles and conduits exploded, injuring several more crewmen. Several alarms went off as the computer voice spoke once more. Several enemy warheads detected, shield emitters offline. Kelly froze as she watched the alien torpedoes come racing towards the ship. Hull breach detected decks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 sections. 1 though 5 and 7. 16 bridge and main engineering emergency force fields in place. I'm getting casualty reports from all decks, said the acting ops officer. Sick Bay has their hands full. Any other vessels on sensors? Kelly thought for a moment. They were in bad shape, but here they had a disabled alien vessel. She might not have a better chance to find out more info of their mysterious foes. Have the Marines prepare a boarding party. We're not going anywhere for a while. May as well find out as much as we can. 2 hull penetration units raced toward the alien vessel, each packed with 10 Marines. Impact in 10 seconds, exclaimed the tactical officer. Kelly stared at the view screen, trying not to look at the gaping hole in her bridge with nothing more than an emergency force field between her and nothingness. She looked at the timer as it counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The HPUs slammed into the alien hull. There was a second of radio silence before the Marines confirmed successful hull penetration and dropped into the alien corridor. The Marines looked around. There was debris everywhere and no signs of any aliens. There was a single horizontal strip along either side of the corridor, each flashing a dark hue of green. This is Alpha 1, so far no signs of Charlie, the O3 Marine said. But there is extensive damage to the corridor. It's possible they may not have survived. Try to find a computer terminal, Kelly's voice rang over the radio. Download their database. We need to find out as much about them as we can. Affirmative, he said back before turning back to the other Marines. Beta Squad, stay here and set up a perimeter around the HPUs. Alpha Squad on me. He motioned them to follow him. The squad walked down the corridor. Other than the occasional radio checkup and the sound of power armor crunching down on debris, utter silence filled the way. The Marines entered a room, filled with weird-looking equipment and menacing devices. One Marine looked at a metallic device with a long tube and a sharp object with a pointy edge. I can only imagine what that is used for, he said, pointing to it. I don't even want to know, another said, shaking his head. The lead Marine looked at them. Scan for anything that may be a computer terminal. Sir, I'm picking up a motionless heat signature 10 meters ahead. The O3 motioned ahead and they began moving towards it. He noticed his BPM indicator was rising. He started taking deep breaths and saw it starting to go down just as they were approaching it. He turned a corner and suddenly his BPM indicator rose rapidly. I'm reading what appears to be cybernetic implants all throughout its body, including billions of nanotech devices in its bloodstream. My scanner's not indicating any brain activity. Our Lil friend is dead. He continued scanning until his scanner mapped its genome before he started typing on it. I'm sending the data back to you. He and several other Marines continued looking around before stumbling upon another room. I'm detecting what could be computer terminal, one Marine said as he started making his way over to it. Alpha 1's display suddenly alerted him. Heat signature motion detected. I'm detecting motion. The Marines took cover and looked around. I detected heat motion, but I lost the signal. He looked around but couldn't find it. Man down, I repeat, man down. Suddenly, his display's alert status lit up again. Multiple heat movements detected as his display lit up in red outlines. Multiple bogeys! Lay down! Suddenly, the room burst into a frenzy of green energy balls being fired upon the Marines' positions. Return fire! He yelled, and several Marines opened fire on the heat signatures. He turned back toward his fallen comrade just in time to see the medic's neck impaled by an alien stinger. His eyes widened as he desperately looked for his rifle, but before he could pick it up, the alien quickly retracted its stinger and let out a deafening screech. He noticed its tail beginning to turn a shade of purple starting at the tip and making its way up, the alien screeching and flailing the whole time. He quickly picked up his rifle, aimed, and fired. A blue ball of energy struck the alien, sending it flying back. He rushed to the medic, who was bleeding heavily. He grabbed the medical device from his hand, selected the cauterize setting, and began using it on his neck. A red light hit the wound, and it began closing up. He only hoped it wasn't too late. All but 3 Marines checked in. He looked down at the medic, who was barely conscious. How are you feeling? The medic looked back up at him with a dazed look in his eyes. Just a little lightheaded, sir, he said, before coughing up blood. All right, easy, bud, he said before looking at the Marine standing next to him. Alphas 3, 4, and 5, take him and the other two back to the extraction point. The rest on me. Alpha 1 made his way to the computer terminal, stepping over dead aliens and puddles of black liquid. He pulled out a small black device which scanned the interfaces before reconfiguring itself. The small light on it turned from red to blue, indicating it was ready. He plugged it into the alien terminal, and a small holographic projection displayed a status bar that began to rise from 0%, indicating how fast the AI was hacking into the alien's database. It didn't take long for the indicator to reach 100%, then a new indicator popped up displaying the percent of the database downloaded. This indicator rose much more slowly. "There must be hundreds of terabytes of data in here," he exclaimed. "This is going to take some time." A few minutes later, the radio cracked. "Alpha 1, this is Beta 1. We received your wounded. We're loading them into the HPUs now." "Understood. This is going to take a few more minutes," he replied, looking at the indicator which displayed 41% and was slowly rising. "Begin packing up. I want to get the hell out of here as soon as we're finished." "Yes, sir, The radio suddenly cut out. "Beta 1, do you copy?" he said, noticing his BPM begins to rapidly rise again. "Beta 1, do you copy?" Silence. "Alpha 1 to any Beta, do you read me?" Silence. "Alpha 1 to Angel." Silence. "Alpha 1 to Angel, do you read me?" Silence. He looked at the three Marines still with him, and they looked back at him in silence. He looked down at the indicator which displayed 42%. "Fuck it," he said, pulling the black device out of the terminal. 42% of their database was good enough. "Get back to the extraction point, move," he ordered, shoving the black device back into his pocket and gripped his rifle as they rushed back to the HPUs. As they turned into the corridor, he heard a blood-curdling scream of pain and the sound of weapons fire. They began a full-on sprint. Whatever was happening, Beta Squad needed them, and they needed them now. They came upon 4 alien soldiers, backs turned to them and firing on Beta's position. The Marines quickly raised their weapons and fired on the aliens, killing them before they had a chance to react. The scene before them was a mess. 5 Beta Squad Marines were down and bleeding out, screaming in pain as their wounds boiled. The rest, as well as 3 Alpha Marines, were firing on the aliens. "Retreat into the HPUs! We're getting the hell out of here!" "Captain, both HPUs are disembarking from the vessel." "On screen." The screen displayed the HPUs pulling out of the ship, which began venting atmosphere as soon as the HPUs detached from the hull. "What is that?" "Zoom in." The view screen zoomed in on the hull, which showed several alien figures getting sucked into space. "This is Alpha 1 to Angel, do you read me?" The voice rang out across the bridge. "This is Kelly, we read you loud and clear. Status?" "We have multiple wounded. It's urgent. Have sick bay standing by." Kelly motioned to the ops officer. He began typing on his console. "I was only able to get 42% of their database. We had to make a hasty departure." "Understood, Doc. In Shuttle Bay 1, we'll have doctors standing by." The tactical station beeped. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships dropping out of FTL less than 1 AU away." "Jesus Christ," Jenkins exclaimed. 25, 29, 32. I'm reading 35 vessels and holding... Red alert. Alarms started blaring and lights flashed red. She was done with this. All of it. It was bullshit. After all they'd been through the past 27 hours, saving a race by the skin of their teeth, outnumbered and outgunned, she had defeated the squad of ships sent after them, outsmarting them in the nebula. They had successfully gained information on the aliens, gathering biometric data and a good portion of a ship's database. All for nothing. They couldn't run, their FTL drive-by blown. And even under the best of circumstances, there was no way they could take on that many enemy ships. And these were hardly ideal circumstances. This is how it would end. Obliterated by their fleet, all her actions for nothing. "A few of them," said the tactical officer, "but we'll only be able to take a few volleys before they go offline again." Kelly felt the hopelessness of it all, the same hopelessness Admiral Zillick must have felt when he sent the distress call that started this whole ordeal. Being faced with annihilation by an overpowering enemy. At least he had the chance to send a distress call, but their long-range transceiver was busted, and their short-range transceiver was only effective within a few light hours. And even if it was effective, surely their comm would be jammed anyway. Once the HPU's dock raised shields, she sank into her chair. Captain, I'm detecting more vessels coming out of FTL, but from the opposite direction. Identify. Set a course for the fleet's battle line, full speed. Kelly couldn't believe it. Did a real-life Deus Ex Machina just save her ass? Not even a minute ago she was sure of her impending doom, but now she could feel her sense of hope rising to the point that she was certain of victory. Her ship's primary mission was peaceful exploration, and still managed to hold its own against a small fleet of the alien vessels. And here she had a fleet of bona fide warships here to protect her. Captain, we're being hailed, chimed the comm officer, hardly able to contain her excitement. On screen, Kelly replied, barely letting the comm officer finish her sentence. We're fine now that you're here, but I recommend the fleet go to red alert immediately. That alien fleet is very hostile and will attack. I wouldn't recommend running either, they will follow. Besides, our FTL drive is shot. Understood, Captain, he said before motioning the fleet to prepare for battle. You'd better have a damn good explanation for this. Command won't be happy our first contact with a new species comes in the form of a battle, especially with our reputation in the galaxy. She took another look at the biometric data they had received, and the analysis performed by the computer, her eyes fixed on one particular line. This would be the first time humans had met another intelligent predator species, and for the first time in her life, other species' initial distrust of humans seemed reasonable. Alarms blared as the carrier ship took more and more punishment. A console exploded a little, too close to the Admiral. Shields down to 71%, shouted the tactical officer. They're coming in for another run. The Admiral had never seen an alien species fight like this. Their ships were weaker, but he noted that they seemed to be adapting to his tactics. The more successful the tactic, the faster they would adapt to it. It wasn't just the tactics, but their weapons too. The fleet's railguns would accelerate the foot-wide projectiles to nearly a 1/4 the speed of light. At the beginning of the battle, it didn't matter how far the enemy ships were, they would hit every time destroying them. But it didn't take very long for the further out enemy ships to actually manage to dodge them, and closer ones were starting to accurately predict the trajectory and adjust course right before they fired. At first, it only took 7 quantum cannon shots to disable a ship's shields. Now it took 16. He had to admit he was impressed not only by them, but the fact Captain Kelly managed to keep her ship intact for well over a day fighting these guys. The battle space was a frenzy of weapons fire, maneuvering ships, and flying debris. The alien fleet was down to half its original size, but the Terran fleet had already lost a battleship, a third of the fighters, and many of the ships had taken heavy damage. The destroyer had moved into position protecting the carrier. Any alien vessel would have get through them first. 5 of the alien vessels started targeting the destroyer, laying down heavy bombardment of the vessel. The destroyer focused fire on them. They were getting a little too close for comfort. The Admiral watched as it managed to destroy one of them and started targeting the second. He watched as a railgun fired on it. The alien ship predicted the shot and tried to adjust course, but they weren't fast enough as the round grazed one of its engines, sending the alien vessel in an uncontrolled spin directly for the destroyer. The Admiral watched in horror. The ship collided with the destroyer, blowing up in a spectacular explosion. Lay down suppressing fire, we can't... The Admiral couldn't even finish his sentence before the 3 remaining alien vessels bombarded the destroyer with warheads, lighting up the view screen. So the alien vessels have adjusted course. They're heading right for us. A fury of quantum cannon shots, antimatter warheads, and railgun projectiles were released towards the enemy ships. They dodged the warheads and projectiles but couldn't quite dodge the cannons. It wasn't enough. They continued to accelerate towards the carrier, closing the distance, despite the punishment they were receiving. The Admiral could only watch as the 3 ships got closer, but they weren't slowing down or changing course. In fact, they were still accelerating. What the hell were they? Oh, dear God, he mouthed, realizing what was about to happen. Impact Alert 3 vessels detected 67 armed warheads. The computer voice rang out, only confirming what he already knew. "Impact in 5, 4, the tactical officer shouted. 3, 2, 1. The admiral was dazed as he heard the computer voice ring out once more. Hull breach detected. Decks 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27 sections, 5 through 32, emergency force fields offline, emergency bulkheads in place." Holy shit. Kelly couldn't believe what she just saw. She stared at the view screen, wide-eyed. Due to their extensive damage, the USS Angel had hung away from the battle, hiding behind friendly lines as ordered. But she had that feeling, the same feeling she had before she ordered her ship into the Enorian colony system. She was going to break orders. Again. "Captain, their shields are down and have a massive hull breach. Their reactor is exposed," said the tactical officer frantically. "Move us into position between their hull breach and the battle. We can't let anything hit it," Kelly barked as the helmsman tapped his console. "We're just going to have to get there before they do." She paused. "Tactical, lock what cannons we have left of that ship and fire as soon as we're in range." "It's going to be a close one," chimed the helmsman. She watched as the alien vessel closed within a few kilometers of the ship. Tactical. The rest of the fleet had closed and set up a defensive perimeter around the carrier, ready to defend it. There were only 5 alien vessels left, but they didn't attack. They held position for what seemed like an eternity, both sides waiting to see what the other would do. Eventually, all 5 alien ships turned around, accelerated, and FTL'd out of the system. Kelly sank into her chair. It was over. Finally over. Following the battle, the fleet returned to Terran space. After debriefing the crew of the Angel and reviewing the ship's logs, Captain Kelly was court-martialed for violation of General Order 1 without permission from command. However, due to saving the Enorians, and more importantly the presence of a new threat she had the most experience dealing with, she was not relieved of duty but rather reprimanded and given command of a battleship and ordered to patrol the outermost colonies to look out for the new threat. There was much debate about what to do with the Enorians, but eventually they were given a colony to rebuild and welcomed into the Alliance, making them the second alien race to fly the United Terran Alliance flag. After reviewing the alien database, Command figured out the aliens called themselves Brucali. Although they weren't able to determine the location of their homeworld, they did find out they controlled a massive stretch of space, nearly 30,000 light-years in diameter, 5 times as big as the Alliance. They also learned that the aliens' government had an aggressive expansion policy, believing all other life forms to be inferior beings to be exterminated. As such, they were embroiled in multiple wars on multiple fronts and had plans to expand deep into Terran space. They also found out one more very frightening thing about them. The cybernetic implants served to enhance abilities, and among other things temporarily plugged the aliens into a hive mind, giving every one of them the entirety of each other's memories, endowing them with a unique ability to adapt much faster than they otherwise could.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.